We're,
Sure. Yeah. I'm like, what would look okay with the sneaker? I'm gonna take a open sneaker. You could just saw the running, so my left ones are gonna be worn more than my right ones.
exempt, provide moderate income housing. Do you agree? To incentivize.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started in a couple minutes, or actually in a minute. So everyone wants to take their seats. So we don't have a quorum yet. As soon as Nina joins us online, we'll have a quorum, but we're gonna go ahead and get started because we can begin with the background information and circle back to any voting elements. But thank you all for being here this evening. This will be one of our last meetings till the final report is complete. Pizza is a way that we could show some appreciation for all the hard work that you've done, so thank you. It's a small token of gratitude on behalf of the county for all the hard work that you all have put in over the past 12 months, and I can't believe this has come to an end. It's been quite a ride, so we appreciate all of your efforts, all the information, your thoughtful discussions, and where we're headed with this. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer to start with our program for this evening. Jennifer.
Great, thank you. So a few things just to share before I get into this. Exciting news, I'm a little bit weight bearing, so I'll be able to move around a little bit tonight, not too much though. But on the table, there is, and David, if you could actually hold that up right there. Nope, you just put your hand on it, just hold that one up. So there are copies of this. There are not enough for everyone, because as you can see, it's very thick and in color and double-sided, but this is the full output from the online survey. This is in your virtual binder, but we also recognize that the survey closed last Tuesday. So a week ago today, I know what it took for us to go through it, so I do not imagine that is going to be what everybody else had the opportunity to do. I will be going through the survey results, but wanted to make sure I did not and won't be going through every single open-ended comment. So they're here, there's enough for people to share around the room. So all of the comments are there, and you can certainly come back to it and look at it in your virtual binder. So while we do not yet have quorum, we're keeping an eye online. We know there were several individuals who are going to be joining us online. We are getting started with just the intro information. Anything that requires any kind of a vote, clearly we will wait until we have quorum. So again, thank you for being here today. Make sure I'm hitting the correct buttons. Overall, our agenda looks very similar to what we have done in the past. We'll go through our timeline, everything else, and then we will finalize our recommendations this evening. And there will still be homework for the very last meeting, which will be June 2nd. As always, just always like to do the quick reminder, we're here because there is an executive order. And now we have a quorum, so that's recorded as well. We are here because of this executive order, that while we do have individuals who have joined us at times representing the organizations, and we are committee and our task force members were named in this executive order. And so those are the only individuals who are on the task force. Again, the vision that we have had over time that was developed through this task force are what's shown on the screen, and really what we'll do at the end of this evening, and then again at our next meeting when we're looking at the full report, is that we will come back and put everything up against this vision to make sure that it's holding true to the overall vision. Last meeting, we went through a lot of recommendations to get to either overall general approval of them, of recommendations to move forward, or to a consensus that has the asterisk next to it. When we say majority yes, majority no, there were many that we still had additional discussions to go with that, and we'll be talking about that this evening as well. So you can see here with the density cap requirements, what the majority yes were. Those that were the majority yes are the ones that moved into the online survey and are the ones that were presented at the public meeting. The last meeting, we talked about the density cap requirements, we talked about the land use percentage requirements and the MIHU requirements. We also talked about the expansion of uses, materials, and design guidance. And again, as I said, anything that said majority yes, those recommendations got included into the online survey and they were moved forward to the public meeting as well. So with that, let's go ahead and talk with the prior meeting minutes approval. As always, they are recorded. You have the opportunity to review that recording. Task force number 9 were that the meeting minutes, the recording was previously distributed. Is there a motion to approve task force number 9 meeting minutes? Ryan, and second by Fran. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And online, was there any, I see hands up. Wonderful. Thank you. The motion passes. We have approved the meeting minutes. The overall schedule and expectations for meeting number 10. So we are here where we were before, where we see the public meeting, public survey. The draft report has been started with the information that we talked about previously, just documenting our process. And out of this evening, when we finalize the recommendations, those will go into that draft report. That will be provided to all of you prior to the June 2nd meeting for you to do a review of that. And then we'll talk about that at that June 2nd meeting for any comments. So this very much is a documentation of this task force, and you very much are going to have the opportunity for all of those comments before it's finalized. So when you receive this, it is a draft document, and looking forward to having those conversations at the next meeting, so we ensure that everybody's voice is heard within this document. As before, this evening is really about developing the final recommendations with all of the refinements included. And our schedule, our expectations, so we will review all of the public meeting materials, the materials being the outcome of that survey, the comments as well, and looking at refining and finalizing the recommendations, and that next meeting being the recommendations report. So with that, this information we've discussed the last 2 times, but I do really want to touch on this again, just because this is now the meeting where we are finalizing recommendations and talking about this draft recommendations guidance. So first and foremost, as we're looking at these recommendations, I know the question came up earlier as well. None of this is going before anyone out of this meeting and this task force anytime this year for zoning code changes. We are not writing zoning code, we are writing recommendations that will really be a lot of what needs to be reevaluated, what needs to be investigated further, and how to go about doing that. So with each of these, everything we've done, we've already discussed on these topics, and tonight is really that representation of the materials as we've discussed. There's summaries to help remind us what we've talked about for each of the various topics, and then the online survey itself. So we will not necessarily have all of those final details vetted out, nor do we need to. And I know, Fran, as we were talking over a slice of pizza, it was, well, I'm not quite sure like what exactly to put in there, or you know, and I'll just use the one example, like a village center, how do we define the boundaries of it? And that could simply be, yes, we want to do something we recommend to do this with village centers. We recommend the boundaries be defined, and that maybe perhaps looking at a half a mile. That can be what the recommendation looks like. And that's really on this last slide where we talk about with, you know, the definition of apartments will be split to include apartments as one land use and townhomes as a separate land use. With this recommendation, the task force notes, there needs to be guidance regarding it. The task force recommends consideration for defining different types of apartments. The task force recommends evaluating different open space requirements. So these are what these final recommendations are gonna look like. And when we get to the first round, kind of walk through how we're gonna do that in a streamless and efficient manner, so we could all be heard tonight. We've mentioned this before that really all of these recommendations came from the task force, came from our conversations, came from the online survey, both in the fall and then again, the most recent one. There were initially 42 recommendations. Through this task force, you narrowed it down to 28, and then we'll be discussing the final ones now. I also want to just go because the recommendations, we've printed those out. They were in number order, and everything that we presented in the online survey, at the public meeting, and tonight are using that same number. For example, creating another Newtown district was always number 1. Original petitioner, we had both recommendation number 15 and number 16. The reason I'm going to show this slide and walk through this is we've paired them together. So we're not necessarily going to go through 1 through 28 on the recommendations. We're doing it in an order that pairs things together because we recognize one recommendation may impact another. And so they're lumped in an order that also makes sense as we talk about it first of what's the role of the original petitioner. The next would be the PDP, CSP, FDP structure. So all of those are paired together because the decisions made in one may impact the next as well. Likewise, then we'll go to the downtown and village center simplification, the expansion of uses, materials, and design guidance. And then you'll see there's a lot of them under density and land use requirements because these really all do come back to what those density and the land use requirements are. And we do have some of the boards around the room here to help with some of that. So if you need to get up and take a look a little bit closer, you certainly can do that. And then the last grouping is the moderate income housing unit requirements. So as we get into the recommendations, I'm going to flip through these very, very quickly just to show the order and give a feel for it. Each of you has in front of you a green card and a red card, and it's not just to celebrate Christmas in April. It is also for voting purposes because this is the meeting we want to take account of those votes and make sure that we're very clear. So if you agree with something and I'll say, are you in favor? Green is go, so that's yes. So you put up the green card. We'll wait until Jeff will be the one who takes count. Scott's going to be the one over there who records it on these boards in front of us so that we have that very definitive. For those online, we have 2 reactions. We can do, because we don't want to just do the hand up and then the hand up again. So for those of you online, I believe we have a thumbs up and then a smiley face.
And can you just confirm what?
Yeah, there's a thumbs up, a thumbs down, smiley face.
Perfect. Let's do for the thumbs up and thumbs down makes the most sense. So when I say, do you agree? Those of you in the room will put your green card up. You'll hold them up until we have it counted. Those of you online will put a thumbs up symbol. Thank you, Ashley. Those, when I say everyone put their cards down, you know, those who vote against it, put the red card up. Those of you online, put the thumbs down symbol. So it's very distinct. We're not getting confused of somebody not being able to put their hand up or down quickly enough online.
And then Jen, I put in the chat for those that are viewing, that I will be voting so everyone can see in the room for Ashley. And then Hannah is doing Tim and Nina.
Okay.
For votes.
Wonderful.
So everyone can see as well.
Thank you so much. That will make Jeff's job even easier. So again, let me run through this pretty quickly, then I'll come back and actually present the information. So how we'll do this is, so the first one, role of the original petitioner. I will walk through what those recommendations are. I will give the overview of what our discussions were regarding that Dorner task force. Then I'll give you the output from the online survey and a few of the comments. I'm not going to read all of these. I don't expect you to read all of these. I just wanted to go through them briefly and just hit a couple of highlights out of that. This is where if you want to read further, there are several copies of the online survey in the room. You can certainly do that. Then we'll come to this section. We have, which these are just the 3 recommendations together. These are on the board up here. Scott, he will be kind of standing there. We'll have some discussion. So are there caveats that we want to add in? As there's caveats, we'll make sure of what those are until we identify that there's that final recommendation with all those guide rails that we talked about, that yes, this is our recommendation. In addition, we recommend to look at this, we recommend to look at that, we recommend to look at this. Then we'll take the vote. We'll need someone to make a motion and a second. So I just wanted to run through that just so everybody understood kind of the flavor of what we're going to do. The other thing just to note is when I shared several of those comments, some of them I just want to know, because I have read every single word that was written as part of this survey. There are individuals that voted one way, but their comments actually suggest other things, or their comments say, yes, however, if we did this, I would then be a no. And so I tried to really highlight that because the numbers in the voting or in the survey are not always necessarily exactly what people's opinions were as they were putting their comments in. There's also, when we get later, I'll show you, there's two recommendations that are opposed to each other, and yet they did not show up in the recommendations and people's input as being vastly different. In situations, both of them were, yes, let's do this, but those two actually go against each other. So that, you know, with any survey, there's nothing can just be taken as, oh, that's what the general community said. As a poll, you know, you need to dig into the comments, and that's what we'll do tonight as well.
Will you let us know if there was any significant discussion at the public meeting that might affect, you know, any comment there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and just overall, we did have between the last meeting and this meeting, we had the in-person meeting, we had the virtual meeting. I know we asked for people to sign up for only an hour at a time so that we did not violate the Opens Meeting Act, which we did not do. We did have a small amount at each session, and we went through the presentation very much in this format of what the recommendations were. And then overall, I know on the virtual meetings, there were a number of questions, and it was predominantly questions about things. And at the in-person, I think it was a lot of questions, which was really what we were hoping for, because it is a lot of information. Everyone in this room has had the benefit, and I'll say absolutely has the benefit of being a part of this process for 12 months now, or almost 12 months, and hearing information and learning as we've gone. It's a lot to take in. And so we wanted people who came to really understand better. So as they're taking this survey, it could be meaningful for them as well. So, thank you. All right, so going back to the role of the original petitioner as our very first topic, there were 3 recommendations that really touched on the role of the original petitioner. The first 2 are recommendations 15 and 16 that were very much about the original petitioner. It was remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. The second was the county should review the potential for the planning board or another entity to take up the role of the original petitioner. The asterisk on these meant that we still had some caveats or some discussion to work through. And overall, when you look at these two recommendations could actually be combined really almost into one, with one being a caveat of another. So if we were to remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs, it could also be that the task force recommends the county review the potential for somebody else taking on that role. The third recommendation that had to do with the original petitioner was also talking about creating another new town district. So just as a reminder, everything is within section 125. The very first portion of this of maintain the original petitioner's ability to expand or restrict a new town district. And so that was very much of, as the code cites today, if there's a certain amount of congruent space and the ability to handle a large community again, that the original petitioner has that ability to expand or restrict that new town district. So a few of the recommendations, some of the items from our recommendations discussion. Overall, and these came as our task force as a whole, want to ensure there's a neutral party as arbitrator of approvals or denials. So that came out, and we'll see that in a number of the comments as well. A potential that the property owner could act on their own behalf rather than the planning board take on the role of the original petitioner. So rather than the original petitioner being signing off to then go through the review process, looking at a property owner doing that on their own. Consideration to maintain a role like the original petitioner, to maintain the vision of the original plan or use a master plan for this purpose. So not necessarily the original petitioner, but that there is still something or someone or some entity that is maintaining that to go back to that master plan. And then use criteria to apply to the planning board that separates how they deal with Newtown differently than the rest of Howard County so that the uniqueness of Newtown can be maintained. And finally, there are many options for who could serve as original petitioner that have been suggested in previous documents, and that they should all be considered as part of this as part of the recommendation. So just very briefly on that one, you have a virtual binder that has more information than you can read in a single night. Many reports in there. So this is something that has been discussed previously with some recommendations in there. And again, I'll come back to that concept of, should the role of the original petitioner be removed? One of the guide rails, as I continue to refer to them, could be the task force recommends reevaluating those recommendations from other reports of who else could be a part of it. I offer that up not to encourage one way or the other, but just to have people thinking of what a guide rail on these recommendations are. So looking at going back to removing the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. When you look at the slides, you'll see the yes is always on this side. The no is always kind of in this dark blue. The no is in the lighter blue, and the not sure or no opinion is in a gray. The comments are color coded, that whatever in dark blue goes with the yes. There were no comments that were within there. So that's why there's not a box for that. And often the not sure, no opinion comments were simply, I don't have enough information. So I did not include those. Generally, you can see that the consensus here is to yes, that they agree with this recommendation. So that's the thought process in that. Yes, we agree with this recommendation to remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. And several of the comments came in of just looking at putting some other kind of an entity like a Columbia Planning Board, replacing it with a county entity, which would oversee and approve Newtown zoning, including a master plan pattern books, that property owners should be able to amend their own FDPs for their site only, and that a private entity should not be a gatekeeper to assessing a public process, unelected, not required to respond to public policy changes or the collective of the will of the people. Something else to note, when you see the ... there's more to the comment. This is the most significant portion. The slide is only so big. So I took some of the other information out. So that is the first one. Let me go through the other two. So the county should review the potential for the planning board or another entity to take up the role of the original petitioner. So again, generally, yes, people agreeing with this recommendation, 48.6%. And the no and not sure, roughly actually split 25.7% each. In the yeses, really this became it should be a neutral party, that there should be an entity of some kind, whatever that is. And again, just basically that you're having an entity to ensure that that overall plan is still kept. And the no county entity should take over the role of the original petitioner. An unbiased entity should take over the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. So, very last one, maintaining the original petitioner's ability to expand or restrict. Very split here of yes and no. However, this is one of the items that I wanted to note, that if Newtown zoning is maintained in some form, I think it's okay to maintain the ability for Newtown zoning to be applied to land etc. However, I do not support retaining this section at all within 125. And then in here, let me go back. DPZ should do what Howard Hughes is doing. So when you think about this in relationship to 15 and 16, and that's why these are grouped together, this is now calling out DPZ basically in that role of original petitioner. And then the other one says only if the original petitioner is replaced. So generally speaking, a lot of information, I get that. I've had the opportunity to delve into all of this for the last week. But generally speaking, when we're looking at this, the one theme that's been coming through is if the original petitioner is being replaced, there should be an entity, whether it is named or just recommended of who to be looked at within this overall recommendation. Yes.
So if someone's in,
Oh, and I'm sorry, we do have microphones, so online, so can hear you as well.
Sorry, it's for online.
so if you, let's just say hypothetically, you have property that's in Newtown zone, it's Newtown. And petitioner wants to restrict it, can they boot you out under the current?
We can boot you out.
I mean, if you restrict, if they have the ability to restrict what's in the Newtown zoning, does that mean that they can like carve out someone's land? I don't really know what restrict means. I guess that's what I'm asking.
So how it works now is if you want to make. So how we typically apply the original petitioners, say for instance, you have a plan and you want to change the land use or zoning designation on that FDP, you would need to go and ask the original petitioner for permission to do that. But they can't kick you out of Newtown zoning, because that would be a rezoning, like that, they're, right.
Rezoned it.
no, they cannot rezone your land. That has to be a legislative or a quasi judicial council function.
So then what are the practical consequences of this? What can the petitioner really do?
Well, so again, for instance, maybe on that particular FDP, if you wanted to change your commercial land use category and allow a veterinary office, and on that particular FDP, a veterinary office isn't listed, but you want to put that on your site, you would go to the original petitioner and say, I'd like to have a veterinary office here. Do you have an issue with that?
Can you go back a slide?
Absolutely. So this is,
In the original
so
petition.
this one is very specific. They're grouped together because they all have to do with the original petitioner. But there's removing the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs is some of the questions you're asking. And that's where you have to go to them, sign off, and then move forward. And then this one, the very first
That's the
section.
one that I'm
This is to
not-
create a whole new Newtown district.
Well, I get that.
That
part,
one.
And it says to restrict as well. The expand part I get.
To expand or
Or the-
restrict.
But to restrict.
Well, I guess if someone wanted to come into the Newtown district as a new district, then the original petitioner could prohibit that, but they can't kick someone out. That would have to be an action of a rezoning request. But if you want it to be zoned Newtown, then and added to the fold, then that's when that would come in.
I got you. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
Great.
it's the way that it's worded, it's a little bit confusing.
Okay. And we can certainly adjust that within the
I don't
recommendation.
think you're saying you can't really restrict.
Yeah, the word restrict.
I
So
think that's.
we'll go Brian and then Nicole.
Restrict use.
Well, that's not what it says.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to Brian and then Nicole and then get to the actual boards over here so we can start looking at
Sorry.
no problem. We can definitely look at changing verbiage or revising as we need to.
Good point in time to sort of say that Howard Hughes, and it was John D. Wolfe, said that they were going to just pass anything you wanted to do on the FDPs, they were going to just rubber stamp it. And I actually was involved in trying to get gas stations redefined on the FDP because someone was trying to redefine it in a way that was beneficial to them, and they signed off on it right away. So the point is that they've not been acting as a gatekeeper in any case.
We've had a much different experience.
I'm gonna say that.
Yes. Thank you for that. Nicole?
No, honestly, I've already said it, but I mean, it sounds like the original petitioner cannot, as you said, kick you out, so therefore.
Correct.
It's not, maybe the word restrict is just a little off.
Okay.
I think it's only maybe expand for Newtown, for only
Okay.
Newtown Street.
All right, so let's go ahead and move over to the boards here. And as we're talking about them, as he mentioned, we have removed the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. And I know, Brian, kind of what you're saying is how they're functioning now, from your experience, I know it hasn't been everybody's experience, is they're approving things regardless. And I know from others in the room, your experience has been, it's very much holding things up. Not holding things up, but it's just another step in a process, and we'll talk about simplifying process later.
There's another part to what Howard used does. They got the architectural committee. And that they're also making decisions there, which have taken in our village sometimes 6 months, even 2 years to get through. So they're really not acting as oversight at all.
Okay. Are there any, we have 15 is remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs, and 16, the county should review the potential for the planning board or another entity to take up the role of the original petitioner. Let's go to 15. Are there any discussion or guide rails anybody wants to put onto this one, or is somebody ready to make a motion and move this forward as is, as the recommendation? All right. So Nicole has, just because we're writing it up here as well, Nicole Campbell has made the motion. And Michael has, thank you. It's like, I heard two male voices right next to each other, just making sure. Michael has seconded it. So the recommendation is remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. So at this time, all those who are in favor of maintaining this recommendation, please raise your green card. Yes. All right, and so there's anybody opposed? One. All right. So this motion, this recommendation, this.
We asked why, because I'd be interested.
Well, I'm concerned because I don't understand the.
We need a microphone here.
I'm concerned because I don't understand the legal implications of what we're doing. Okay, and I mean, I am not a lawyer. I've spent the last 3 days living with lawyers, but I'm not a lawyer. And I understand where you're going with all this, but if we're not careful in what we're doing through all of these recommendations, are we making Columbia as an HOA obsolete? And therefore, somebody's going to go to court and say, we don't have to pay the assessment? Has somebody thought about what we're doing? And I don't know any of those answers. I'm just like, I'm very curious here.
And appreciate that. One of the things, and one of the comments on another survey response, somebody said that's legal. And I put that in exactly for this reason of and everything has to be vetted through an entire process. Every recommendation that's coming out here, again, is not going directly into zoning code changes. It still needs to go through an entire vetting process to fully understand what the legal ramifications, how that would be implemented, all of those pieces. And there's certainly components, and when we get, because we'll move on to the next one, when we talk about the county should review, and that could be something that comes as a guide rail of, as we're looking at who this is, to ensure that Columbia is maintained under an HOA system. So those are the types of things we can add in as they're important and relevant to the recommendation. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to recommendations number 16. The county should review the potential for the planning board or another entity to take up the role of the original petitioner. Are there any additional guide rails that anybody would like to add into this? Nicole?
We don't wanna wind up with the same problem we have now, so I think another entity should be at least a neutral one, to the
Okay.
extent it is not a government.
Okay, so adding on the guide rail that the task force recommends, it is a neutral entity. David?
Okay, so I'm a little confused about this one as well.
Okay,
Doesn't, so back to what you were talking about. As I understand it, like the original petitioner, they were sort of the gatekeeper, right? You
Mhm.
had to go through them to get to the planning board, right? Or to get to the next step, which is the county.
yes.
And so it's really, I don't understand how this matters.
Well,
One, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah. So the idea, I'll go first and we'll go to Nicole, and it looked like somebody online might have had an option as well, or a comment as well. So with this, there is, one of the concerns that has come up over several of our conversations is there was a plan. And Columbia has a plan that's part of its uniqueness and all of that. So is there an entity, is that the county planning board, is that DPZ, is that another unbiased entity? Is there somebody who, without a vested commercial interest, who
Yeah.
is still gonna make sure everything matches the
I
plan?
get that, but the question is, should the county review the potential for the planning board
Mm-hmm.
to be, the gatekeeper, but isn't that the gatekeeper for this? The planning board would review it to go, whether it goes to the planning board, it seems like it's just kind of weird wording to me.
Yeah, and they could be more that the planning board does,
It has to come out to make it really, it just seems to me.
right, and this recommendation is looking at who else could potentially hold that. So it's the potential of, is it the planning board, is it another entity? You know, essentially, is that gatekeeper being pushed to the planning board as a whole, or is there another kind of entity in front of that? But I know, Nicole, if you had something, we'll go to the online comment, we'll come to Linda and then Renee and then Ryan. Okay, did you have anything else? All right, if not, if you can pass that straight back to Hannah in the back row.
Oh, Nina has her hand raised. She didn't type a comment. I think she might want to say something.
Okay, Nina, if you want to say something?
No, yeah, I just wanted to say,
She lowered her hand.
do we have
Okay.
to have an entity to be the original petitioner? I mean,
I
it's just
think
an
the planning
extra
board
step.
could also continue to be in this role as original petitioner, and they would just do it as they do all the other types of processes in which they vet these. I mean, there would be a criteria. So how it works now is the original petitioner, as you say, gives approval to go to the planning board. But the planning board could still review a petition, and if it met the criteria to, let's say, move forward to the next phase, to come to them for a plan review would then be the next step. So the first thing is,
It's just a preliminary scrutiny.
correct,
by the planning.
exactly, correct. So that's how this could be utilized when you get into the site development plan that requires approval by the planning board for projects in Newtown.
Okay, it goes to Ryan and then to
Ryan.
Brian.
Would this recommendation be more clear if it says something like, if the role of the original petitioner was maintained, the county should then review?
Mm-hmm.
And that could be part of your motion.
Okay,
So it would say, if the role of the original petitioner would be maintained, the county should review the potential for the planning board or another entity.
No, because not. Can I? Go, you go, girl. So it's because these two are kind of going in different directions, right? If you got rid of the original petitioner altogether, then you don't need this one. If you maintain the original petitioner, then the question is, but you want to get rid of Howard Hughes, then it's who takes it over. So I agree with him. I think it makes more sense to say exactly what you said with the addition of neutral that I added.
Okay, so just, we have made the recommendation to remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. So this one could be, if we still want an entity to hold kind of that checklist, it could be,
You want me to read what I have here?
absolutely, with a microphone.
Okay.
just so that we're all clear. So what I have on here is, if the role of the original petitioner is retained, the county should review the potential for the planning board or another neutral entity to take up the role of the original petitioner.
So Brian was next. Then Renee, then Michael.
You're picking the planning board, but we should also put in there all the other ideas that have been in the past reviews. They should all be listed. Otherwise, it looks like you've got a preference to the planning board and then support from Linda in the description of it. So I think we should list all the other options from the past reports.
Very quickly, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So let me just note, I know there was a recommendation to that, which is fine. I would say that we can't have another planning board just for Newtown or Columbia, because the state land use article and our charter does not allow to have a second Columbia only planning board. So I would just caveat that to not be what a motion would be, or if we're gonna add and itemize.
Okay,
Well, we got to define another entity.
so the
Let's have a
definition,
list of all the other entities that could
Okay.
potentially be the gatekeeper.
so the guide rail then would be that the task force recommends review of the prior reports and appropriate identified entities to be evaluated. Okay.
That's what the stars for. Can't have everything. Impossible to have a sentence that says everything that
But
we
you
talked
don't want to
about.
leave.
I understand what you're saying.
Right,
I think that's what the stars. for.
okay, and after, I kind of lost Renee and then Michael. Okay, Michael? Okay. So something to keep in mind, we just stated and approved, remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDPs. So we said to remove that as a whole. So with this, we're saying, do we still want to see a role taken over to have this check the box?
Here, I got it over there. I have.
We have to get rid of the words original petitioner. If you do that in number 2, then we'll be in the right place. We're getting rid of original petitioner. That's the past. We want an entity to take over the duties of the original petitioner. Something like that, so we don't get hung up on the word.
Well, I think what you wanna do is vote on, I mean, you could just vote on 15 and just take this one out. That could be a vote. Or you could do that example.
All right, so it sounds like, and I'm just, from what I'm hearing, that we still want some kind of an entity to still be a checkbox. So it's not just, so somebody to still basically an unbiased entity. Is that what I'm hearing?
That
Okay.
wasn't the point. The point was just that it's kind of weird to have a planning board. And Linda explained it would just be like a pre-check for to go to the planning board.
Yes.
Okay,
So, but I think we have 2 issues. I think to your point, we either need to combine 15 and 16 and make the motion that Brian suggested, or that's moot because everyone agrees this is not gonna happen because the original 15 was the answer.
okay,
Right, so I think that's where we need to go now, so we can continue on, we're never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're running out of time already.
all right. So Brian, did you have anything else to add? All right, so what we'll do, we'll take a motion on 16. As Scott, read what you have up there is written.
So.
Again, if the role of the original petitioner is retained, the county should review the potential for the planning board or another neutral entity to take up the role of the original petitioner. And then I have a guideline on here from Brian. The task force recommends review of prior reports and identifying that neutral entity.
So if you, keep in mind, we've already voted 15, remove the role of the original petitioner to amend commercial FDP. So if you are looking to not have this role in there whatsoever, then you would actually vote no to 6.
No, because the county might not follow the recommendation.
All right,
So
All
you
right,
can vote
thank
yes
you.
or both. Oh my gosh. Sorry,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you. All right, so then the recommendation as Scott read it, is there a, does somebody want to make the motion?
So moved.
Michael, second. Sharon. All right, if you are in favor of keeping this recommendation as Scott read it, please raise your green card.
Have it reread again. I'd like to have it reread.
Absolutely, Scott, go ahead and reread that.
If the role of the original petitioner is retained, the county should review the potential for the planning board or another neutral entity to take up the role of the original petitioner. With the guideline of the task force recommends review of prior reports in identifying that neutral entity.
I'd like it better if the words planning board weren't in there. Just.
Wait, there is a motion on the floor right now, though, so we are gonna vote as this is. All those who agree with this, go ahead and put up a green card. All right. All those who oppose, put up a red card. 2. 3. All right, motion passes. Let's move on to creating another new town district to maintain the original petitioner's ability to expand or restrict a new town district. We've talked about this already in our discussions this evening. So is there an individual would like to make the motion for this recommendation?
We add the same thing we added at the beginning of that other one.
Yeah, that would be my comment.
If you're gonna retain the role of the.
If the role.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you need that in there. So.
I'm not sure the English is right, because are we talking about the original petitioner, the only that one, which is now Howard Hughes? Or are we talking about a new original petitioner has the ability to expand? Do you understand my question? So are we talking about somebody else or some other entity that wants to start a new town, or are we only talking about Howard Hughes or their replacement?
Yes, that is a great question, and
the
it was
Catholic school.
written as lowercase to not be the original petitioner of the Howard Hughes. It is essentially that role of. So if we retain the role of.
If they can't restrict, can we take out those words? 'Cause it sounded like you were saying that they really don't have that role anyway, to like eliminate someone who's already in it.
Okay.
So could we take that part out?
So remove the words or restrict.
They can't. I don't
But
like the idea of
let's
having
keep
say
it to a
they
single
don't have that.
conversation.
Sorry.
Actually, let me just retract that a little bit. I think restrict in this sense could also mean, I want to come out of Newtown. I want to be rezoned something. So the original petitioner could then say, no, we don't want you to be, but then that would change a lot of things, so.
Great language.
Do you know that's in the regulation though? Cause I don't think that's actually in the law about how that would be handled.
In terms of them being able to restrict someone doing a rezoning. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, because it's on the FDPs. I would just say in terms of this, that's how I would read this particular sentence. But again, rezoning is what would need to occur to come out of the Newtown district.
So I went to Catholic school, and I'm reading the line above it that says creating another Newtown district. Okay, so I'm back to my question. We're only talking about that. This to me looks like it's about one petitioner, not somebody else. Does this allow somebody on the street to come in and act as an original petitioner for a different Newtown in Western Howard County?
That is, so again, coming back to all of this, that was, when we talked about this, it was creating another Newtown district, a new Newtown district in the county. And there's requirements, so kind of, Matt, I think to your point as well, the requirements are you have to have so much contiguous land, and it was somebody else coming in, and that's why it's lowercase as an original petitioner coming in. And what we've talked about as well is that when you look at all of the land across the county, and maybe it's farmland that gets sold, there's a lot of different ways other than a new town district that farmland can be redeveloped. So the idea here was basically cutting that out of creating any future new town districts. And so that's what this is saying of maintaining, so right now that an original petitioner could come in. Yes, that an original petitioner could come in and expand or restrict a new town district. I will ask Hannah if, Toby, you can go back to Hannah to their.
Okay, I'm not an attorney, but she's agreeing with me. That's why I'm asking, because an original petitioner makes sense. B does not.
Nina.
All right, let's let.
It's about creating one though. It's about creating.
Yeah, this is about creating another new town district. So Hannah, if you can read off what Nina
said, I think it says the, not an original petitioner on this slide.
Right.
It does, and we can change that word to say an. So the idea is, do we want to retain the ability or maintain the ability for an original petitioner to come and be able to create a new town district in Howard County? Or do we want to remove that and say that there cannot be another new town district in Howard County? And when we talked about this initially, part of it was simply that there are many ways that land can be redeveloped. There's many processes already in place within zoning for other land to be redeveloped.
What if it says, she just said, and then
Maintain
instead of
an original petitioner.
ability to expand or restrict, since this is about creating, maintain an original petitioner's ability to create a new town district. Because it's really not about the current original petitioner expanding or restricting. Sorry, but that's what's really about.
All right, so then the language is, and I think to capture, that's great as well, to capture the heart of these. I know we've talked about these before and it didn't come up then, but it's really good to have them come up now so we're all comfortable. So it would be maintain an original petitioner's ability to create a new town district. Does everybody concur on that statement? Is there a motion?
Motion.
Do you want me to read it?
Nicole, yes.
Let me read it so it's perfectly clear. If the role of the original petitioner is retained, maintain an original petitioner's ability to create a new town district.
Take the first part of it off. So it should start with maintain an original petitioner. Yeah.
Sorry.
You can have it in your town.
So maintain an original petitioner's ability to create a new town district. Is there a motion? Renee made the motion.
Second.
Greg seconded. That way we'll get multiple names in there. All those in favor of the recommendation as read, please raise your green card. All those who do not recommend this, all those who do not recommend this, please raise your red card.
I'm serving popcorn.
Four, there's four. Okay, so motion passes. We are moving into the PDP, CSP, FDP structure. As you can see, that took us some time to get through on the original petitioner. We do need to get through all of these this evening, so definitely we want to streamline. There's a lot of discussions we've been having on these, and definitely look at all of these combined because a lot of these do really relate to each other. So with that, we have a total of 6 recommendations that came through. Maintain the current overall structure, but seek to simplify the approval and development process within Newtown District. Standardized requirements by land use types across the FDPs. Remove CSPs as a step in the development process, which could also function as something to be evaluated in consideration of simplifying. Consolidate the FDPs and the requirements to create a table of permitted uses by area. So when we look at number 3 and number 5, we should look at those, kind of thinking about all the language together. Expand the types of uses that can be approved administratively by DPZ and identify the most effective opportunities for public engagement and maintain them as a priority throughout the development process. All right, so what we've talked about is generally the task force wants to see a streamlined process, but this needs to be defined. And this is where we put some guide rails on what a streamlined process is. That there should be a consideration of a master plan to oversee development and recognize the special intent of Newtown. To remove CSPs from the process and the acknowledgement that this will remove some of the engagement steps. And in all aspects, make sure we maintain the unique nature of Newtown and maintain that even as some FDPs of similar nature could be consolidated. So looking at the survey, again, a very busy slide. When we talk about maintain the current structure, but seek to simplify approval and development process. Yes, overall agreeing with this recommendation is 57.1% and no is 34.3% with under 10% not sure. Part of this and the yeses is simplifying the process and cost to build housing is part of the solution. And I just put in parentheses as housing crisis because there was a lot more in this. But keeping in mind that, so everybody's aware from a developer's perspective, the more steps in a process, the more costly it becomes, and that's what this is referring to. And the current structure should be modified to allow smooth implementation. So, oops, sorry about that. This no, I put this in here because this has a lot of really good guide rails as well. And that's why this no is in here. So in considering this section of the recommendations, any revision must maintain the roles of all entities in the current review, oversight decision process, maintain significant public review and feedback, provide comprehensive big picture orientation of the development and all information diagrams and sketches currently in the CSP in an easy to understand format. So basically enhance and streamline the process for approval and development and do not focus on simplification. So the reason I say, and I mentioned early on that some of these comments really could go either way for the yes or the no, is this no comment really comes back to it's not, yes, let's go ahead and streamline the process. Let's not just call it simplifying the process. So that might be a consideration when we look at the vote of we might not want to say simply simplify, but perhaps streamline the process. When we talk about standardized requirements by land use types across the FDP, so yes was 54%, no 25%, and not sure, no opinion 20%. And again, this comes back to the one beforehand. Anything done to simplify the process would be a benefit. In particular, it does not make sense that 2 areas of Columbia with different FDPs with identical built environments and land use have separate FDP requirements. So that's part of basically, the evaluation of looking at all the FDPs and identifying how, essentially consolidate those and having those line up. This is also where, and Renee, you brought up earlier, of what does that process look like? How do we do that? That's something that this task force does not have to identify. It should just simply identify, yes, this needs to be reviewed and evaluated and the everything being understood as we go through. And then on the no, that's why I say that this is legal. I put up here to have that conversation that anything as a recommendation will be vetted through completely and understood before it can go forward. And then the other no is FDP should be amended to guide future redevelopment. Columbia redevelopment should be planned just as it was in the beginning. So again, this is where some of these yeses and nos really, when you read the comments, kind of start coalescing around the same idea of, really what came out of this task force as well. How do we simplify, streamline processes to make it for every person being able to understand and go through this. Remove CSPs as a step in the development process. So 51% said no, 37 said yes, 11 with no opinion. Those who said yes, they were useful in the initial development, but they're not needed any longer or for redevelopment. And actually both of the comments are similar, and there were other yes comments that were all very similar. And in the no side, comprehensive sketch plans are helpful tools for the public and provide much needed feedback to developers so they can improve their plans for the public. They provide all the information, and it seems CSP would seem to only be necessary for properties being brought into Newtown and should be incorporated into the current CSP. So again, a comment that is, it's useful only at a certain point in time. Going on to consolidate the FDPs and their requirements to create a table of permitted uses by area. Yes of 51%, no of roughly 29%, no opinion 20%. And the very first one here, I think, is that overall, if you use FDP templates, not sure the value of creating a table of permitted uses via area. So this is where that 2 recommendations ago, and this one really can go hand in hand a bit. Firmly support an overall allocation of how the land is used, and make sure that it does not limit or reduce use of the property compared to the FDP. And then I did not write any of these. These came in from the community. It is insane that there is not equity across similar land uses, and the process of administering all of this in their current state does not make sense. They are also not written to the standard code that modern code standards would be written to with vague language. And on the no side, modified FDP should guide the redevelopment process just like they have for the last 55 plus years. And each FDP is recorded separately and allows for case-by-case modifications. So again, with some of these, when we get into legal or how they're recorded, these are all things that would be part of this recommendation's next step process. Talking about expanding the types of uses that can be approved administratively by DPZ. Yes, 34%, no, 48%, and not sure, 17%. One of the items that was asked with this question is, so what kind of types, if this were expanded, what types would it be? And so that's what this is. Somebody recommended all, someone said housing, mixed use, residential, anything that is eligible in other zoning districts. And then the other individual who left a comment under the yes is yes, but not until a master plan and pattern books manuals are developed, which is one of our later recommendations. In the no, some of them were saying that the recommendation's too vague. Any expansion must go through a public process. Basically, any expanding type should come only after knowing what a redevelopment plan would look like. And there should be somewhat of a public process involved here, similar to how the Army Corps makes administrative determinations with stakeholder input. So still looking at input here. And the final one before we get into discussion, identify the most effective opportunities for public engagement and maintain them as a priority throughout the development process. Yes, overwhelmingly 71%. Now keep in mind this recommendation is maintained as a priority. It does not dictate the number. So as the process might be streamlined, or if CSPs come out and voted for that, then with that, the public meetings associated with that step might come out. So these are not unique to each other or opposing each other. This is simply saying that it still needs to be maintained as a priority. So offers an opportunity. So somebody says, yes, I think for the most part, process to get public input is theater, not substance, or yeah, these are on the yes. It offers an opportunity for people to delay for no reason. And somebody else said there are too many meetings. Public engagement should be focused on planning and guidance. And the guidance manuals, once that's done, if a project conforms to the plan and the guidance, fewer meetings would be required. So these are still under the yes, but we still want public meetings. But you can see in the comments that it's still talking about a efficiency in those public meetings. Again, a lot of information, a lot we've already talked through. We have a number of recommendations up here that can be interrelated to each other, or they can have their own guide rail set up. And this first one, maintain its current overall structure, but seek to simplify the approval and development process within Newtown District. As noted, one of the comments was instead of saying to simplify, to say to streamline. So definitely I'll just open if there's any discussion or guide rails anybody wants to put on this one. Brian?
So the comprehensive sketch plans for the Columbia we have now, well, we don't have any because they've gone. So that's the structure that allows Newtown zoning to go forward. So in a new town zoning, in another new town, keep having the comprehensive sketch plans is a good idea because the FDPs basically implement what's in the comprehensive sketch plan. So if you wanted a redevelopment plan, it could be a comprehensive sketch plan, then the FDPs could be modified to implement that new comprehensive sketch plan.
I would like to potentially amend this just to say seek to simplify the approval and development process, because I would like to vote for that as well as removing the CSP. And I feel that if we approve this in its current form, those two will be in conflict.
Internally in this sentence.
So start the sentence with seek.
Right, seek to simplify the approval and development process within Newtown District.
Yeah.
And not be married to maintaining its current structure.
Okay. Brian?
So this isn't a confusing thing. Are we talking about the process that someone goes through to redevelop a piece of land? That seems to me that's like site dependent plans, things like that. Whereas with the Newtown zoning, having the comprehensive sketch plan, that gives us a chance to redevelop it following the guidelines. So again, getting back, are we really talking about what's in the Newtown zoning for another new town, or are we talking about what we got now? I'm really confused about the development of the land through having a site development plan, and then what are we trying to streamline?
Overall, the streamline during the discussions was the overall process, because there are many, many steps within that process. Now, we can seek to simplify or streamline the approval and development process and just look at all the steps, everything that's required, and we can keep CSPs in there. They can both be together. So this is overall, as we're looking at this,
But we can't modify a comprehensive sketch plan because we don't have them, right? They don't exist. They were thrown away sometime. So we can't modify that. So we don't have a process there. I think what's often, I'm still getting back to this whole thing about developing land as opposed, so often we talk about how many steps are involved. You look at a village centre or downtown, there's many steps, but you look at just one plot of land, then there's not so many steps and it's pretty straightforward.
right. This is, because we have the recommendations on Village Center and on downtown. So this is just for those plots of land. The overall structure. So basically we're saying seek to simplify the approval and development process within Newtown District. What this really comes down to is ultimately the recommendation is evaluate what there is, kind of revisit it, seek to simplify how many steps there are in that and what makes sense for this process. The Village Center is a separate recommendation, as is downtown Columbia, and we have simplifying on those as well. So with that, and again, just being conscious of time, is there, with this language, you could read it, Scott.
It's been modified to say, seek to simplify the approval and development process within Newtown District.
Is there a motion? Motion. Tim, a second? Ryan. I just want to make sure everybody's name gets in the report. All of those in favor of the recommendation as Scott read, please raise your green card. Yep, 11. All those opposed to this recommendation, please raise your red card. All right, motion 2. There are 2.
Thank you.
Motion passes. The next one is, and again, let's keep this in mind with the 3 and 5 together. So as we vote on things, 3 that we're going to be talking about next, standardized requirements by land use types across the FDPs. 5 was consolidate FDPs and the requirements to create a table of permitted uses by area. So these can stand alone, however, they are, you can see that they can function, part and parcel together. So standardized requirements by land use types across the FDPs. Is there any guide rails that anybody wants to put in here? And this is basically saying, again, there's a full process this would need to go through to evaluate how this would be done, but looking at all of the different FDPs, the 200 plus FDPs, and saying that there's land use types that are similar. And in that case, those FDPs that share a land use type would share requirements by that land use type across the FDPs. Any additional guide rails anybody wants to add in? All right, seeing none and no change in language, is there a motion? So Nicole makes the motion, Fran seconds the motion. If you concur with the recommendation, standardized requirements by land use types across the FDPs, please raise your green card. It is unanimous, I believe. No, I apologize, it's not unanimous. It is not for the recording, it is not unanimous. And for those opposed to this what was your count on yeses?
13.
All right, and for those opposed to this recommendation, 1. So the motion passes. Remove CSPs as a step in the development process. And this has the asterisk because we had talked about some additional discussion to be had. Are there any guide rails or discussion anyone has for this? Brian?
So it doesn't seem like it's in the process any case, so I don't understand why remove it, because it's something that was part of the original process. So I'd like to know what the reasoning behind this particular one is, what we're trying to get. If we had another new town district, then having the comprehensive sketch plans really shows you what you're going to get in that new town district and helps the planning. And that's what makes a planned community.
Correct. So this would be, and to Brian's point, and as we talked about earlier, with maintaining the ability to create another new town district, this would still be in there to be part of that. Renee?
Okay, so if there's a new town, you still want to have a comprehensive sketch plan, yes?
Yes.
But you're
Unless
going to
we
take it out?
Unless we remove this, yes.
So how would people know what they're buying? You're saying they would?
It's an excellent conversation point, and these recommendations came up as we walked through the process, which we also talked about. Because we did these across multiple meetings, we would always do this cross-check as well. And so this is this cross-check as well.
I think this is the essence of a planned community. You've got to have plans. So, to implement the original vision of Rouse, he developed this. So you had a pre-development plan, then you had a comprehensive plans, obviously because each district was different. So this is really the essence of a planned community. Taking it out, that means there would not be any planned communities in Howard County ever again, which would be terrible because this is supposed to be the model community which people from around the world have come to see.
I have a question.
David?
Aren't there other steps? I mean, like, we're making it sound as though there's, like, you just willy-nilly get to do whatever you want, but Don't you have to go before like the design advisory panel?
Yes.
Like all these other steps along the way?
Yep.
We're not talking about the elimination of controls here. We're talking about simplification.
Yes.
And, you know, there's a lot of duplication in the process, and that's what we're here to meet about, is to try to streamline. Cause
Absolutely.
as a guy that, you know, has kind of been through it, it is very, you know. Yeah, I mean.
Duplicative and cumbersome are the two words I heard.
You do the same thing like 7 or 8 times.
Yep.
And I think it's important, really, that we all understand what it is, you know, before we make these representations. It's really important. It really is. I mean, yeah.
And before, Brian, before you speak to that as well, remember the case studies. We looked at 3 other communities, and those 3 other communities have gone to a 2-step process versus the 3-step process. Or have different steps in the process as well. So keep that in mind, that it does not stop planned communities. It would stop a new town district being planned in the same exact way as Jim Rouse did it, but it does not stop a planned community as a whole. It just changes it from a 3-step to a 2-step. We'll let Brian go and then we'll come back to you.
So I think what aren't you describing the actual process of actually developing the land as opposed to planning the community? That's, I think, a couple of times I've seen, that's what you seem to be looking more like from the developer point of view, as opposed to the original developer point of view. You're just, the complicated process that we see like in the village centres and other places, it's nothing to do with the original concept plans and the comprehensive sketch plans.
Well, the design advisory panel submission.
That's nothing to what we're talking about is the base zoning. What you're talking about the process to go, you have to go through to develop the land.
I think that's what this is talking about.
This is in the development, this says in the development process. And it also, keep in mind that, as I mentioned, with all those case studies we did, there's different ways to have planned communities. Columbia was built on a 3-step process, the FDP, CSP, or PDP, CSP, FDP. Other communities do 2 steps.
So I would be in favor of having a CSP if you complied with, if it's some type of density, you could skip some steps because it's already pre-planned, it's baked into the process. Okay, so that, otherwise I feel like we're moving into Texas here. No zoning, no whatever, just build.
Say no text.
Let's get close.
No, it's still a 16, you know, I want to correct one thing.
It's not that though.
Yeah, we're not talking about the village town center or the downtown Columbia. This is just the overall process right now. We still have to get to those. So this is, the recommendation is remove CSPs as a step in the development process. So I have not heard anything that changes the verbiage here, just you might vote yes or no. And to the point of this, keep in mind, this is if there is another new town district, then it would go through a plan process. We've seen things that have 3 steps. We've seen things that have 2 steps that continue to function. So it just will go ahead unless there is any additional verbiage that to be added or changed.
I know, what's what I just said.
All right, then. Is there a maker for the motion, remove CSPs as a step in the development process? Nicole makes the motion. Tim seconds. All those who can agree to remove CSPs as a step in the development process, please raise your green card. All right, 8. All those who do not agree with this recommendation, please raise your red card.
Is that red?
Okay, that's what I'm like. Okay. 5. All right, so motion passes. The next one is consolidate the FDPs and the requirements to create a table of permitted uses by area. Now, keep in mind, we just approved standardized requirements by land use types across the FDPs. So this would also be consolidate the FDPs and their requirements to create a table of permitted uses by area.
Question,
Nicole?
is this the way to standardize it? Is that what the purpose of this one is, or is this something?
This can be something different of consolidating the number of FDPs, and putting a table out there.
268.
There are 268 of them today. Seeing nothing else, is there a motion for this recommendation?
I actually have, I'm sorry. This seems to be saying two different things, right? One is consolidate the FDPs and their requirements, and then the second is to create a table of permitted uses. So are we creating a table of permitted uses, or are we consolidating the FDPs, or both? I'm kind of confused there.
As it's written, it's both. You can certainly, if you want to break these two apart, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, creating the table seems like a no-brainer. The other part,
Okay, so consolidate the FDPs and the requirements, period. Create a table of permitted uses by area for the FDPs.
5A and 5B or something, okay.
Fran?
I was just wondering, some FDPs, you know, it's all like, mid-size housing, but there's some FTPs where there are multiple uses, right? So by doing this, we create this table. I'm trying to think about how many dimensions this table has, because there's more than one use within an FDP. There's more than one type of land use. So by doing these together, we're not throwing information away. I just have to be assured that we're not going to throw the information away that's in these horrible things.
Correct. All right, so let's go with 5A. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I was gonna make another recommendation to 5A, because I think it needs to be something like consolidate similar or identical FDPs and their requirements, not just consolidating all of them.
Okay, consolidate similar. So consolidate similar FDPs and their requirements, period, as 5A.
So would this be industrial parks or business parks with that standardized FDPs? Is that what you're saying? That, so if we've got an industrial park with say 3 FDPs, you would consolidate those all in that industrial park?
They would be looked at by their land use and then determined whether or not they would be consolidated,
So
yes.
what entity would be doing this?
That will be determined as we look through it. Once the recommendation is identified, all of this will be, Department of Planning and Zoning will take a look at all of them and then identify what's the appropriate entity to move these forward.
As it relates to Newtown zoning or any zone?
Everything we're doing is section 125, Newtown zoning district. So, yep, so I'm gonna say, just based on time again, because we are not gonna get through everything with the amount of discussion that we've had over the last 12 months already. So section 5A, recommendation 5A is consolidate the similar FDPs and their requirements, period.
Motion.
You have a motion?
What would that, I mean, just sitting here, I have no idea of what the definitions of those requirements are. So to give you blanket permission on whatever the requirements are that go with the specific FDPs.
And that's where the similar FDPs come up and what those similar requirements look like. So there might be two that are identical, but they're coming in under two different FDPs. So is there a motion for 5A, consolidate similar FDPs and their requirements?
Motion.
Motion by Nicole, second by Fran. All those in favor of 5A, consolidate similar FDPs and their requirements, raise a green card. Get 10 as well. All those opposed, raise a red card. 3. All right, motion passes. 5B, create a table of permitted uses by area for the FDPs.
So moved.
Thank you. Michael moves, Brian seconds. All those in favor of 5B, create a table of permitted uses by area for the FDPs, raise your green cards. I have 11. All those opposed to this recommend 5B. Motion passes. Expand the types of uses that can be approved administratively by DPZ. And the types that were talked about in the survey were housing, residential, mixed use, all. So it really, this is one where if you want to put some guide rails on it, if you want to approve this recommendation, you could certainly do that, of what should be looked at for that, or we can move forward with making a motion. All right, Brian makes the motion, Michael seconds. All those in favor of expanding the types of uses that can be approved administratively by DPZ, please raise your green card. 7. All those opposed, please raise your red card. 4. All right, so motion passes. Identify the most effective opportunities for public engagement and maintain them as a priority throughout the development process. Renee, yes.
So if we're going to give administrative approval to the Department of Planning and Zoning, we don't need any public engagement. If they can administratively approve everything, then why are we going to have public engagement?
So that's ban not give administrative approval.
Well, we just did.
No.
It didn't say, you didn't limit it, you didn't put any guardrails on it. You just approved that motion with no guardrails.
But we didn't pass anything, we just recommended.
Okay, you recommended with no guardrails.
It's vague on purpose.
Right, so they can put up, I have financed property all over this country. $1 billion. There are no guardrails there. So I'm okay, that's what everybody approved, but if that's what they approved, then we don't need any public input.
It's kind of dressed though. I mean,
Yeah.
it's vague, but there's so many other things we're voting on.
This is the types of uses. This is not saying everything, and it would be evaluated for what the types of uses are. Public engagement is still part of different processes. The redevelopment is still part of different processes, and there are certain things that administratively can be approved, certain things that would not be able to be approved administratively. So this is basically saying, identify the most effective opportunities for public engagement and maintain them as a priority throughout the development process.
And I also just mentioned, because I think some of what I remember a lot of this conversation being around is just around, it's things like decks. So right now, if you were to go into another zoning district, there are administrative DPZ processes where
I agree with you, okay, I agree with you, but that's not what was passed. It's not, we didn't approve decks, we didn't approve ADUs, we approved anything that DPZ recommends to whoever's going to be, whatever the approval process is going to be for this in the next year.
Yeah, I mean,
There are no guardrails.
the scary thing is if you, let's say you're somebody who wants to build like a big daycare center. And then, and you build it in a place where like you're not allowed to have like a dispensary next to it. And then next thing you know, someone administratively gets approval to, and you would have never done it, never would have built.
So this also, just to share, I'm asking for guardrails as we go through this. So please raise your hand so we can incorporate that. as
What
we
I'm
go
saying is,
through.
I agree, I understand that you're asking. My comment is I don't see the training for this group to make to understand the risk versus the opportunity in each of these decisions.
That's why we talk about it.
So she asked if you wanted to put any guardrails on and nobody said anything, but I mean, could it be like a dollar value on or something to do with the amount of redevelopment that you're talking about? I think that's something that should be considered. I kind of agree. I didn't vote on that one because I was a little confused myself on the vagueness of it.
I just want to reiterate, recommending to expand does not necessarily mean the county council is gonna say everything can be administratively approved. So.
And thank you for noting that as well. As with each of these recommendations, first of all, there is also the final report there, the draft report everybody will be reviewing. Everything still needs to go through a process after. So these recommendations will go through, they'll be evaluated to determine who's going to be doing the further evaluation. That will happen. There's nothing that can be done that goes against the overarching zoning codes, policies, plans, everything else that are already in place. I see your green card up there.
Ashley has her hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to comment on the part about, we gave them authority, so no
We
public.
can't hear you if you're speaking.
No, can you hear me?
It is my computer. Sorry, Ashley. Go ahead, try again, Ashley.
Hey, is that coming through? Hello?
Is Ashley speaking?
She was unmuted, it just.
Did you see her box populated?
All right, Ashley, we weren't able to hear you, so give us 1 second.
She typed never mind.
Okay,
Fair enough.
sorry about that, Ashley. So we are on identify most effective opportunities for public engagement and maintain them as a priority throughout the development process. Is there anything anyone wants to add to this recommendation? Nicole, did you move? Is there a second? Sharon seconds. All those who agree with this recommendation, please raise your green card. Fran, your green card. All right, so opposed, 0. Motion passes. We are gonna move on to the downtown and village center process simplification. The 3 recommendations here come back to, now this is specific to the village center redevelopment. To simplify the development process for village center redevelopment and downtown, sorry. Simplify the development process for downtown Columbia redevelopment, reduce the number of public meetings required for redevelopment processes. So the first one, downtown and village center process simplification, that village center boards represent some of the most vested members of the community and should be included in the process. Village center board should not be a pinch point. Simplifications need to be defined and consider simplification by purpose. From the technical survey, do you agree with simplify the development process to support redevelopment of village centers? 60% said yes, 31 no, and about 9% weren't sure. They have, so in the yeses, these have been identified as activity centers and therefore should be easier to redevelop or add housing to. An incentive that gives fast track approval to developers if they conform to village center redevelopment plans and design advisory board recommendations. And in the no, and again, this is one of the no's that the comment kind of supports the yes a little bit, but it's enhance and improve. So coming back to that, not the simplify, but the streamline, enhance and improve, but do not simplify the process. Maintain the village boards and the public's role in review, oversight, and decision process. Hold all meetings at night to enhance attendance. And the process outlined in CB 29, 2009 has some repetition and duplicative meetings that can be combined. So again, there's still some streamlining, if not saying specifically simplify. The next one, same statement of simplify. It looks like you're sharing videos or animations.
Oh.
Okay. Simplify the development process to support redevelopment within downtown Columbia. This one's split, 48.6% yes and no, and about 3% saying they're not sure. So this is for the downtown Columbia. There's too many steps in the current process. Major focus, including public engagement, should be on the development of the various plans, manuals mentioned in the downtown development. Once they've been approved, if a project adheres, it should be processed quickly. It does not need much public engagement. Public engagement should come if a project wants to deviate or modify the approved plan manuals. And then this was the same comment as before, enhance and improve, but do not simplify the process. And then the last one in this area, similar to before, there's numerous meetings. Do you agree to reduce the number of public meetings required for redevelopment processes? 34% yes, 54% no, and about 11% not sure. On the yes side of I agree with this, it says but, and that was in all caps, it's not a typo, but make sure there are actual meaningful engagement points. In general, thinking there are fewer steps meetings, but one that inform, I think that should say informally involve the public. DPZ staff and developers would be best, since the staff could be active participants, just in reminding everybody about policy guidance. And then again, make them more efficient and accessible. So a lot of comments in general were coming up on the meetings of, rather than just checking the box that we have all these meetings, making sure that they're very useful meetings. So that was coming up as a trend when reading all of the comments on anything that had to do with a public meeting. Fran, wait for the Cassidy's behind you.
One of the things I've heard from people who go to public meetings and from developers as well is what people want to know are details when they're holding meetings before details are available. So that there's this mismatch between what the public, and the public gets frustrated and they may not go to the next one because they didn't get what they wanted. So I don't know if the word is simplify or streamline, or maybe the word should be to make it more public friendly and informative.
Okay.
Because that seems to be what the problem is, and it turns people off. And it frustrates the heck out of developers, is what my understanding is. So I'm not a real good wordsmith, but if we could get that idea in there, it's not just simplify or streamline. The goal is to make the public interface more useful.
Okay. I think that let's go ahead and put that for 19 right now, of a guide rail on there. And just put on there of recommend to the, so 19 would be the bottom one. It'd be under 19 because that's the public meetings as a whole. And we'll put on there, because some of that also comes from advertisement of meetings and managing expectations of the public. So I like how you said that at the end, and I talked too much. I don't remember what it is now.
To make the public meetings more informative and useful to the public.
Okay.
For each stage, whatever the stage is.
Make meetings more useful and informative for the public for each stage, and that will be a guide rail on there.
So can I ask a question? So I know everybody wants meetings, and that's fine, but is there a way to use technology that we're not using it today to do some of this work? Because I agree with Fran. People are confused, they feel like they're not getting the information. And what I don't see is the use of technology to get that information out to the public prior to the meetings, after the meetings, et cetera. And the rumor mill is killing me. So I would like to find a way for DPC to create some type of website design or something that the developers use to upload this information, but not what's there now, because in all honesty, if you don't spend hours learning the system, you can't find what you want. But so I'm just saying the use of technology needs to happen here.
Okay. Let's just, there are, as you know, things are on the website, but we can certainly put in that guide rail as well of recommend overall, evaluating a technology as part of the public engagement process.
One of the ways you could do this, it goes back to the PELU, public engagement in land use issues. They come up with these big signs we have on the road, you know, to tell you development's happening. But it's very, if you try and use it, it's not very easy to use. And I think, as Renee says, technology could make that so simple. And I think that's one of the things. And also, it's really important to know just how you can give input and what's valid input. So often people give input and, you know, they should have given the input on the previous meetings. So I think those big meeting signs could be streamlined. So that might be a recommendation.
And I think the two guide rails we have on the public engagement cover that, of the efficient, transparent, as well as the technology. Let's go back on the simplify, and we'll get to this one with the public engagement, but simplify the development process for village center redevelopment. Are there any guide rails to be included on this one? Is there a motion for this recommendation? Ryan and Nicole. So Ryan made the motion, Nicole seconds. All those who concur with this recommendation, please hold up your green card. Twelve. All those who do not concur, hold up your red card. 1. Motion passes. We'll go to the same thing for the downtown Columbia redevelopment. Simplify the development process for downtown Columbia redevelopment. Are there any guide rails to be included on this? Is there a motion? Nicole makes the motion. Brian seconds the motion. All those in favor of this recommendation, hold up your green card. Twelve. All those opposed, hold up your red card. 1. Motion passes. So the next recommendation, I will ask Scott to read it since we have guide rails on it.
Okay, so this is what I have here. So reduce the number of public meetings required for redevelopment processes. The guide rails are make public meetings more useful and public friendly. And secondly, the task force recommends evaluating technology use for more efficiency.
And that first guide rail should be useful and informative. For the public.
So let me read that again. So the guide rail now says, make public meetings more useful and informative for the public.
Motion.
Nicole makes the motion. Fran seconds the motion. All those in favor, raise your green card.
You put it down too fast.
We're really looking at the back for the honors. All those opposed, raise a red card. 1. Motion passes. The next is expansion of uses, materials, and design guidance. So we have 3 in this category. Evaluate the expansion of the design advisory panel role to review projects in Newtown. Explore the creation of pattern books to incentivize the use of modern and sustainable materials, and incentivize and encourage universal design and accessibility in Newtown zoning. Statements when we are going through all of our discussions is we want to be inclusive of sustainable uses, the concern about each FDP having uses identified individually, which keep in mind we've passed recommendations that talk about consolidating that in different ways. That pattern books and overall standards would be beneficial. Better understanding of what can go to the design advisory panel was clarified. And from the survey, do you agree about evaluate the expansion of design advisory panel role to review projects in Newtown? You'll see that some of the no opinions have comments in here. So agree is 40%, disagree 37%, not sure, no opinion 23%. So yes, being a county entity developed just for Newtown would be better. Perhaps the DAP can review plans manuals for this new entity. No, disagreeing is it's unnecessary. This adds one more step in the process. I'm not sure it's required if you do a good job writing the zoning code to control for design and form. And then on the not sure is this should not be for residential. Residents already have to deal with village boards. Commercial only if ARC is eliminated, and the village architectural review panel still maintains the standards, and having the community weigh in seems appropriate. About exploring the creation of pattern books to incentivize use of modern sustainable building materials, 63% agree, 26% disagree, 11% no opinion. In the agree, making sure that books are updated regularly, that every step should be taken to maximize sustainability. If this is a hallmark of planning, it has to be written and accessible to everyone, residents and developers. And it'd be helpful if the existing built environment characteristics were captured and conveyed so future development could fit in. And then the disagree is pattern books are a burden and often required far too early in the process. And talking about incentivize and encourage universal design and accessibility, 68% agree, 20% disagree, no opinion on 11%. And the statement on the agree is as long as it's universal, as long as universal is not mandated other than age restricted communities, building code should cover most requirements as it stands. And then the disagree, which is similar to one of the agrees, is universal design and accessibility in housing is overkill, too little bang for too big a buck. And so that refers to with some of the universal design and accessibility. Houses are not always pre-established for accessibility in the homes as they're constructed. I can tell you how completely inaccessible my home is. I figured this out over the last 2 months. And so that's the caveat in this is with both the agree and disagree is requiring it on everything might be too burdensome. So I wanted to just explain that comment a little bit. That there are building codes out there that do have different requirements. I just saw that Nina's question, can there be a description of universal design and accessibility prior to the vote? Fran, if you are ready to answer that for her as well.
One of my specialties, actually. So universal design is not the same as a disability.
Correct.
That you're trying to cover that. It means doing things like in the bathrooms, putting wallboard for which later on you could add a grab bar. When you do this kind of stuff when houses are just being built with your knobs, whatever, then it's really not very expensive to modify your home if you should need it for a child or for someone who doesn't walk very well or can't see very well. So universal design is very different than accessibility. Accessibility is specifically for those who are disabled in some manner. And then there's a whole bunch of codes for people who are blind, for people who are deaf, whatever. Universal design is not just for old people. Have you ever known anybody who has twins that tries to get their stroller through a single door? Have you ever seen someone who needs a service dog for whatever going down a 1960s hallway? It's these types of things that could be temporary things that you might need or something that you might need over time. The idea is to put this into a home when it's cheap. It's very cheap to put that wallboard up, $10. If you have to do it later and you have to tear down the wall and do it, you're talking about thousands. And I'm not a developer, so I'm not gonna, but there's a huge difference, and I'm hoping this county will soon approve my new universal design criteria. As a side, Prince George's County has passed a resolution, 50% of their homes, including townhomes, must follow universal design guidelines, and they've put them out chapter and verse. I'm not saying we'll do that. I'm just saying this is being done in Maryland, and it's not a burden, and it doesn't make the house look weird.
And thank you, Frank, because I talked about them together. So thank you for making sure to clarify, and Nina for asking the question. They are two separate items of universal design and accessibility. So I have an inaccessible house. So the first one, going back to evaluate the expansion of the design advisory panel role to review projects in Newtown.
They already review projects in Newtown?
No, yes, they review in town center and village center, but not throughout the rest of Newtown district.
Just answering his question.
Yeah, I answered it in the
Newtown is bigger
microphone.
than downtown.
Yes.
I know.
Any thoughts, any guide rails? Is there a maker of the motion?
Motion.
All right, Michael makes the motion, Nicole seconds the motion. All those in favor of this recommendation, please raise your green card. Nicole, are you a green or? Seven. All right, all those opposed to this recommendation, raise your red card. So 8. All right, all those opposed, raise your red cards. 4, motion passes. Explore the creation of pattern books to incentivize the use of modern and sustainable materials. Are there any guide rails for this? Brian?
I like the guide rail talking about like consider adherence to a pattern book as part of like a fast track process. Because if there's community input to build a pattern book, we go through the effort, and then somebody who wants to build a building conforms to that pattern book, I think that they can then move quicker through the process of all the approvals because they've already, met some requirements.
So the guide rail is consideration of fast track for approval process as long as it adheres to the pattern book. Okay.
That's a lot of words.
And the statement behind that is the pattern book process will already have had to go through community input in the establishment of it. So if you're basically following the cookbook as approved by the community, then you are following what's intended. Renee?
So what are we going to include in the pattern?
Yeah.
Incentives for the use of modern and sustainable materials.
I get that. So you use cedar and you can put up a 10-story apartment building next to my house. I'm not sure what's in the pattern book that I don't disagree with the use of pattern books. But I'm not sure that the use of pattern book, I think it should maybe get to skip here and there along the way or become easier. But I'm not sure that we just say, okay, you can get administrative approval or something. I'm not, I think we need to flush this out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And part of this will be a pattern book for it to be established will have to be flushed out by the community before it can even be approved.
I'll just keep in mind too, that recently there has been legislation passing accessory dwelling units. So that could be one example where, pattern books can be used.
Yeah.
But that's a guardrail. Okay, so if you want to say ADUs and pattern books, we don't have any choice almost anyway, so go for it. But if we're going to build something like Patuxent Commons, I think it is, on Cedar Lane, I think the community deserves to have input, even if they're going to use a pattern book. Do you understand the difference? I think they're two very different types of projects. An ADU in my backyard, okay. I mean, I'm not saying my neighbors are going to like it, but okay. But if you're going to put up Patuxent Commons, I think that requires a different level of community input, regardless of the pattern book. However, I think the pattern book should allow for a more simplified process.
So another guide rail, which is a little bit on the fast tracking side as well, but that the recommends the pattern book allows for a more simplified process.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like pattern books are generally form and appearance, so I intentionally would leave that vague to let, you know, the process with the laws decide and work through that. I would also say, generally, it's not if you adhere to a pattern book, you're not, like, that doesn't override zoning or like land use or anything.
Correct.
So if you can't build a 10-story building adhering to a pattern book that's, you know, in a building that's 10 stories tall, it's not gonna automatically give you approval or anything.
And before we go on with discussion, because we did take some time early on in the first rounds, we're close to getting through all these recommendations. Would everyone be okay staying for an additional 20 minutes to finalize?
Can you take a 5-minute break?
Got a hard stop.
No, how many are there? It's got a hard stop.
Okay.
How many are there?
Well, they're not in the order, so we have the 7 in here.
Got 20 minutes, that's true, it's another.
And I just want to clarify the fast track process. We currently have one in place now for commercial development. So, you know, if we were to apply this here, again, it doesn't stop the external process that you would see. It would really change how we do our review times internally, is how we typically handle fast track. So you'd still go through the same process, but the pattern book would limit the amount of, I don't want to say scrutiny is the wrong word, but when we review plans, oh, they're using the predetermined light fixtures, check. They're using the predetermined, you know, exterior facade that we have in our pattern book. Okay, check. So you don't have to go into that deep dive like you would normally do without the pattern book.
Let's go ahead then, if we can get through, because we've already done some of these. So let's get through this one. The next one, we've already talked about guide rails, and then we'll come to a close. The remaining items will be, we'll get to that draft report. We'll put these in that are still highlighted yellow. And so we'll still be able to come back and speak to those in June. Linda?
So do we not have a form of those that need to leave?
With those that need to leave, do we not have a quorum? Because we have 14 people here, so 3 people, or more than 3 people leaving?
Dogs too.
Okay, I'm just trying to, if only 3 people.
We have 13 here tonight.
Do you want us to hold up our thing if we can stay?
Yes, if you
If we have a quorum that can stay, then let's just get it done.
Okay.
I guess is my suggestion.
Your green.
if you can stay longer, for about, go ahead and hold up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 9. That's only 9. We need 11.
We need 11. Very
Nina said, so that's 10.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Renee. All right, we will just continue going through, and again, if you do need to leave, go ahead and do so. We still have the report as a time to discuss, and we have our next meeting as a time to discuss. So is there, Scott, if you can read the motion as we have it?
Okay, so the motion says, explore the creation of pattern books to incentivize the use of modern and sustainable materials with the guide rails of consider fast track of approvals if pattern book is followed. And secondly, pattern book use allows for a more simplified process.
All right, is there a maker? Tim makes the motion. Is there a second? Nicole makes the second. All those in favor of this recommendation as read, please raise your green cards. $11. All those opposed, raise a red card. All right, we have 11 and 0. Oh, 11 and 1. Motion passes. Let's talk about this. You don't have to agree on this, but 28A and 28B to break out universal design and accessibility. So 28A, incentivize and encourage universal design in Newtown zoning. So that speaks to, as Fran had talked about it, we'll have universal design as one and accessibility as one.
So can I ask a question? And I agree, okay, I've got a husband with Parkinson's, so I get all this. But I'm not sure this is a zoning question. Okay, I think that this is a building code issue more than more than a zoning issue. And
Well,
I think we have to be careful which line we're on here.
And this is the discussion of not requiring it, but incentivizing and encouraging it in the same manner that we're talking about recommendations of incentivizing and encouraging in other areas.
Okay.
Okay, let's go. I know that.
All right, are there any guide rails for incentivize and encourage universal design in Newtown zoning? Is there a motion? Fran makes the motion, Greg seconds the motion. All those in favor of incentivize and encourage universal design in Newtown zoning, raise your green card. 12. Everybody, all right, opposed is 0. So 28B, incentivize and encourage accessibility in Newtown zoning. Now, there are codes and building codes and ProWag and other things as well. So go ahead, Renee.
So I see this as an outdoor issue as much as an indoor issue. And I think this is where we can step in. If we have outdoor requirements or, you know, sidewalks, steps, whatever, I don't know what fits in that. I think that should be a requirement. I just see the inside as something different.
And that is, so
Council, in fact, incentivize DIHU, which are accessible in a TOD lot, in a TOD area at the eastern end of the county on the mark line, you know, with.
so, and I will just share.
So we've already done this.
So I will just share, Renee, to your point of it being a requirement, the Department of Justice has ProWag, public right-of-way guidelines, which are the ADA guidelines, and they are, they have actually finally gotten some more than just being guidelines. So that does exist for public right-of-way. So, and then the IBC, and there's several other ADA guidelines. So the incentivize and encourage accessibility in Newtown zoning. Any guide rails for it, Fran?
We need to ask a zoning question of the department. Okay. Are DIHUs allowed in Columbia at the moment? Because that's what that's talking about.
In downtown, there are MIHU requirements for on-site. So are you doing disability income?
Yeah, so when you say accessibility, then that starts to bring up DIHU, not LIHU or MA. And so I want to make sure okay, so I want to make sure we weren't.
No, we're not. It's not a requirement.
Okay.
Or is that, right? I mean, it's.
Incentivize and encourage is not a requirement, correct? Is there someone to make the motion for incentivize and encourage accessibility in Newtown zoning? Fran, is there a second? Greg? All those in favor of incentivize and encourage accessibility in Newtown zoning, raise your green card. 11. All those opposed, raise a red card. Motion passes. 0. Correct. So density and land use requirements, there's a number that are listed here. We'll go through them pretty quickly because they're all very relative to each other. Defining credited open space is about define open space in Newtown zoning to provide greater clarity of uses and align with other county zoning district definitions. Maintain the current definition of open space, maintain the required 36% open space, ensure permanent protection of currently established credited open space areas. We'll get into the apartments definitions, the density cap, and the land use requirements here shortly. So from defining credited open space, what we've talked about is categorize open space not only by uses, but by physical features and associated uses. Consider environmental benefits and people benefits as amenities. And the current definition of open space seems to be working, though maybe some clarifications and limitations, such as the quantity of golf courses, etc. consideration of permanent protection for environmental stewardship only. So define open space to provide greater clarity of uses and align with other county zoning district definitions. Yes is 57%, no 23%, not sure 20%. And this is where defining the statement in the yes is defining different types of open space is extremely important. For example, while some lighting may be appropriate in open space where schools are located, certainly is not appropriate on pathways. And there's desperate need to differentiate between green, undeveloped, or lightly developed spaces and those that have heavily developed amenities such as pools, fitness clubs, etc., which are all within the designated open space. Also pull out school spaces, as our modern concepts of such terms are very different than the original concepts. So there's in the no, maintain it as currently defined. Newtown zoning has credited and non-credited open space. The recommendation is again vague. In the maintain the current definition, the yes is 57%, the no is 20%. It is in the statement, I don't want open space changed, it's our crown jewel. And then this gets into on the nose of maintaining the current open space. This really gets into the clarification. So a lot of individuals, as they replied in the comments, really want to clarify more so than maintaining the definition as it is. So essentially keeping the overarching definition, but with some clarifications within that. Such as basically there's 7 sections, everything should be reviewed. Parking lots and roads serving open space facilities should not be discounted as should not be discounted as open space. It's not aligned with modern understanding of these terms. It gives people a false perception of how much open space actually exists. And then that there's mixed open space in here. And then agree with the following recommendation. And of course that recommendation got cut off. Oh. What is the number 10 recommendation? If you can read that up there.
Number 10 is maintain required 36%.
Okay, so yes is 68.6%, no 11.4, not sure 20%. Open space is critical to the health. Currently met the open space requirement, and as previously noted, the federal conservation exemption should be reinstated. That there were those who wanted a higher percentage of open space, and then again coming back to preserving the open space and a requirement to dedicate land within redevelopment to maintaining the characteristic of built environment. So making sure that it's green space as it goes up to trails, other things behind it. And then the last in here is ensure permanent protection of currently established credited open space. Yes, 68.6% and no 17.1%. Permanent protection of all open space will limit schools and not necessarily restrict other areas, allow flexibility to shift open space while maintaining a minimum percent. Those are on the no's. There were no yes comments. But then on the not sure, and this really got back to the heart of our discussions, permanent protection of green space, yes, but not much value in preserving all the parcels of open space because of the boundary lines and redevelopment of them. So looking at green space potentially as permanent protection. So we'll come to define open space, and keep in mind this one and the next one are opposite each other. So it is in number 8, we talk about define open space to provide greater clarity of uses and align with other county zoning district definitions. And number 9 is maintain it as it is. So if we want to do any clarity, we would not maintain as it is, because as it is exactly as it is. So going back to define open space in the Newtown zoning district to provide greater clarity of uses and align with other county zoning district definitions. Any guide rails? Matt.
I would say we should consider possibly saying that any open space that's permitted now should be grandfathered in if nothing changes to it, considering it's already considered open space.
So put the guide rail to grandfather in existing credited open space.
just in case there's something that doesn't align with these new definitions.
Okay, and the idea of the grandfathering or of bringing that forward is, should there be other county zoning district definitions and something that's currently accredited open space does not fit within some of the other county zoning definitions, we don't inadvertently remove credited open space. Fran?
I think before, the meeting started, I don't like the use of the word align. I'm not a real English person, but I'd rather use the word something like harmonize, so there's a little more give in there. I don't want to take the county's definition. I don't like it. So harmonizing, so people understand, again, we're trying to get clarity, it would be a good thing. But so I'd like to use the word harmonize, maybe someone else can come up with something better.
Linda, did you have something to add on to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, sometimes those types of words, and I appreciate what you're saying, I don't want to take up time, but they're subjective, right? So align is, and this is a code of law, rules, regulations, so subjectivity sometimes is challenging to have in those, in code language, so I would just say, probably better, that's good for a plan, but maybe for code, having the more specific wording, like align, we know what that means, but harmonize can mean anything to anybody, so anyway, that's all.
Renee?
So can you give me an example of what greater clarity of use is? I don't know what that is.
So greater clarity of use would be, right now, as people often are mixing green space and credited open space. Okay, so, and that becomes very different, so when people talk about, oh, we've got all this open space, and not necessarily recognizing that tennis courts are part of open space, and pools are part of open space, so still all would fall under this 36% umbrella, but just having greater definitions of what actually is open space.
Actually,
Yes, and if you could read that off, because it popped up for a moment.
Ashley said she agrees we need greater clarity, but don't want to adopt the county's definition.
Okay. So what we can do is we can define open space in the Newtown zoning district to provide greater clarity of uses, and then remove the align with other county zoning district definitions.
Or you can have an A and B and you vote on that.
Could do that as well. All right. Any other guide rails? So let's go ahead and do an 8A, define open space in the Newtown zoning district to provide greater clarity of uses. And what was the guide rail that was put up there?
The guide rail for that is, the task force recommends grandfathering in existing credited open space.
Renee?
So can I just ask a friendly question? Don't we want to also grandfather in uncredited open space? So if my building's credited open space, but around the corner it's uncredited. So don't we want to grandfather all open space?
But it could change.
Pardon?
The credited could change, the non-credited could become credited at some point.
Yeah, but until it becomes credited, don't we want to just grandfather in everything as it is? That's my point. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, uncredited really doesn't provide the benefit to the developer, right?
Yes.
Credits does.
Right, because they want my building to put up a building.
It's uncredited, I mean, later becomes credited, so I'm not.
Yeah, if it's
But
not
it's not good
credited,
for
it
the
could still change.
Perception.
Yeah, uncredited can change.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, and just if we say we'll continue to keep it as it is, even if we retain that, it could still change. There's nothing really protecting it in the future. So the fact that it's not credited does not, retaining that has, I don't know that really would have a benefit, because it's not credited anyway, so it could become something else.
If you look at some of the slices next to some of the people's homes, that's uncredited open space.
Mhm.
So is there a way somebody could, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen in this world with ADU, so could they say, to whoever owns that slice next to the pathway, next to their house. I'll buy that and put it in an ADU.
It has to be on
I know technically it can't happen today, but I'm just saying, do you understand my questions? We don't know what's coming here.
Correct. We don't know what's coming, but we do know that there are setbacks and an ADU is defined as, it's not gonna be a standalone property because that would just be another home. An ADU or something to that effect is an accessory to the primary dwelling and still requires all the setbacks. Okay. So the motion on the floor right now for 8A, Cassidy, if you can, or Scott, if you can read it.
So 8A is define open space in the Newtown zoning district to provide a greater clarity of uses. With the guide rail, task force recommends grandfathering in existing credited open space.
Is there a maker of the motion? Cole and Tim. All those who agree with the motion for 8A, please raise your green card. Nine. All those opposed, raise your red card. 1. Maintain the current definition of open space in section. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. 8B, define or align, 8B, align open space definition with other county zoning district definitions. So align open space, credited open space definition with other county zoning district definitions.
Is this still gonna have the grandfather for that one too?
Would you like it to have that as well?
We're sticking up for you.
I mean, it's the same issue. I think,
We can add that on, yes, with the caveat of,
I mean, we've kind of already recommended it.
yes, we have.
I didn't know whether it was tied to A or whether it was tied to B.
Okay, so is there a maker of the motion? All right, no maker of the motion, fails for lack of motion. Maintain the current definition of open space. Now, keep in mind, we've just voted to provide greater clarity of uses, so this really would be opposing that. Maintain the current definition of open space in section as noted. Is there a maker of the motion? Brian motions, Fran seconds. All those in favor of this motion, raise your green card. 3. All those opposed to this recommendation, raise your red card. 6. All right, 6. Maintain the required 36% open space. Is there a maker of the motion? Fran? And Renee seconds that. All those in favor, raise your green cards.
It was clear from that survey that we better say yes.
10. All those opposed? 0. Ensure permanent protection of currently established credited open space areas. Now, this one, remember, we had talked about this of green space versus open space. Some of the concerns were if you do permanent protection of credited open space and then redevelopment happens, then that is you're kind of stuck in that footprint of just what that building is and not that credited open space. And when this was brought up as an environmental stewardship recommendation only. So as defined here, that does not fully represent that environmental stewardship only. So we'll ask if there are any guide rails for this or any clarifications for this. Or if you just plan to vote it down, we can make the motion now.
So, okay, so we protect what's there, but is there a way to add to it? So if somebody wants to put up some type of multifamily community and they want to set aside a certain amount of land as open space that wasn't there before, is there an allowance for that in all this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, how this is defined, it is permanent protection of what's already there, which means it's not going to change.
Okay. But so my building's credited open space. So if somebody wants to redevelop that area, which is in the village center, they can't redevelop because I'm sitting in the middle of it?
They would not be able to redevelop the credited open space area.
Okay.
And so again, when this recommendation came up, this was more specific to green space, but it was not defined. And this is where those clarity and definitions of credited open space are very important as well. So is there a maker of the motion? Seeing no maker, this fails. So on the apartments definition, this had a lot of conversation and more clarity over apartment types, potential to define the location rather than the type, define single family attached differently than apartments. And the missing middle discussion relates to recommendations under the MIHU discussion. I'm not going to go through each of these. You can just see in general that the overall, there's still more no's than yeses of adjust the definition of apartments to align with other county zoning district definitions. That creating the separate land use category for single family attached housing types, there's more yes than no. And then creating new land use category for diverse housing types, including missing middle housing types. It's more no than yes. So adjust the definition of apartments to align with other county zoning district definitions. Are there guide rails or anything else to be included with this? All right, seeing none, is there a maker of the motion? Tim makes the motion, Ryan seconds the motion. All those who agree with this recommendation, please raise your green cards. All those who don't agree, please raise your red cards. Great. All right, motion passed. Yeah, we have, it's 3.
Brian, Nina.
Yeah.
She did not, but she's abstaining the last 2.
Okay. Create a new land use category for single family attached housing types. This gets into that townhome versus apartment.
This is the one that creates the townhouse.
The single family attached housing type is a townhouse. Are there any guide rails? Fran, were you making the motion? Fran makes the motion. Nicole seconds. All those in favor, raise your green card.
Nina asked the question.
Oh, does this exclude?
Stacked townhouses.
Does this exclude stacked townhouses?
How does the county see them?
See what apartment?
Stacked townhouses.
Townhomes, as long as townhomes, they're multifamily housing, we don't really define that because they have to be separated by, a party wall to the side or the, horizontal, vertical or horizontal, thank you, Hannah, can't use my words. Yeah, so we would just consider them multifamily, it's not apartments, so it's just multifamily housing.
All right, so we did have a motion. Let's go ahead and redo, because we answered that question, redo all those in, we did have a motion, right? Yes, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your green card. For this one, create a new land use category for single family attached housing types. 8, all those opposed, raise a red card. 3. All right, and then create a new land use category for diverse housing types, including missing middle housing types. are there guide rails for this? Now, we also are gonna talk about MIHUs in a moment.
Some examples.
Trying to think of. Thank you.
Right.
Triplex.
So the question was, can you give some examples? And the answer was things like cottage clusters, duplex, triplex, quads. Okay.
We must do this. Well, this would be dedicated to like a land use for cottage clusters.
So the question is, this would be dedicated to a land use that defines cottage clusters.
Specific, like this one and no other types, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so.
Each new type would have to be.
Right.
Okay. Is there a maker of the motion? Fran? Is there a second? Sharon? All those in favor signify by raising your green cards. Eight. All those opposed, raise your red card. One. All right. The density cap requirement, so we did talk quite a bit about density caps, that it's very low compared to some of the case studies at the 2.5 dwelling units. And we wanted to have continued that consideration to remove village centers from the density cap to promote mixed use there without harming some of the other overall density caps. So the same thing with land use percentage requirements, concerned that the land use percentages limit the flexibility and interest in maintaining that diverse housing mix with the addition of some new missing middle housing types. And again, consideration for allowing higher density in the village center and downtown areas. So overall, do you agree about maintaining the density cap? 57% say yes, 23% say no. Do you agree of considering excluding village centers? 46% said no and 37% said yes. And then evaluate and adjust the land use percentage requirements outside of open space uses in order to accommodate more diverse housing types, and disagree with 57%, agree 31%. So again, the recommendations here is maintain the density cap of 2.5 dwelling units per acre as is. Are there any guide rails? Matt?
I'd just like to point out, if you vote for this recommendation, you are essentially saying, we do not want a single new house to be built in Newtown, no matter where it is, no matter how well they plan for adequate public facilities, even if they place it in between a grocery store, a library, and a school, so they can walk every single place. You're saying you cannot build it because we are at capacity. That's just what I want you to consider.
Renee?
I understand that. My question is, I asked about what is the true density cap in Columbia a couple of meetings ago, including downtown. And I would like to know that answer.
So I did reach out to.
Microphone.
Our Office of our Division of Research. And I had them pull the numbers for that. I asked them two separate questions. One, what is the density for Columbia when you consider the density, what's built to date? And then what would be the density after the full 30-year build out plan for the master plan? So the built to date, if you were to include downtown Columbia, that would, with 36,000 units and 14,000 acres, that would be 2.55 density. And then 30-year build out with 40,000 units would be about 2.86 density.
Then I'm gonna take my question one step further. I personally don't care what the density cap is, but I want is a well-planned community. If I take that density cap though, and then I take out the Patuxent Reserve, because that's sitting next to me, And that's really not, although it's in Newtown, it's not in Columbia. Okay, nobody uses the Patuxent Reserve except for in my village, right? Because we back onto it. Then that density cap goes up much higher. So here's my comment. The cap doesn't matter. The planning of the community matters, and we haven't talked about that here. And that's what, the only reason I'm sitting here, because we haven't planned this community out. I'm fine with you building, but where's the plan? Where's the plan?
So Ashley has to drop. And then we don't have a quorum.
Okay.
So what do we have left and what can we accomplish outside of this meeting? And that's the question now.
My recommendation, we only have about, I think we have 6 of them left. My recommendation is we discuss those 6 at the very beginning of the next meeting. We can put the entire draft report together minus those 6, we'll just write them in there. And then we'll finalize it as comments within the next meeting.
Can we vote on this one since you've already been through it?
Is there?
We can. She's already dropped. Oh.
She's already jumped.
She's good.
Oh, she's
We
there.
could.
She's here.
I'm here.
She said I'm here. Oh, she said she's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, all right, that's warm.
Yeah, we're gonna finish up. Okay, so I appreciate that, Ashley. I know you have to go and I know everyone else has to leave too. So Jen, do you?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we will actually send out an email to see if there's an opportunity to just do a much shorter virtual meeting in between. If there is not, then we will finish this at the beginning of our next and final meeting. Thank you so much to everybody for sticking around for that extra time. There's a lot of material, a lot of great discussion, and really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Take some pizza for the road and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Bob.